I got salt water in my veins, and for me, when I get out in the water, I can have the craziest week in Richmond. When I get out in the water, it's such peace and tranquility, and so I know a lot of you all feel that way as well. It's been fun being Attorney General. Somebody joked the other day they should call me the janitor of Virginia because all the messes I seem to have to clean up. But it's been a joy. I'll tell you, the one thing we tell all of our people who work for me is I want our mindset as Attorney General. And a lot of you guys are probably like, what the heck does the Attorney General do? My daughters ask me that like every week. Like, Daddy, what do you do, right? And we're the lawyer for Virginia, so we have like several hundred people report to me. We represent 20 plus sections, so it's everything from major crimes and emerging threats to we have to approve every wiretap from the state police to consumer protection, the civil rights, environmental. But what I always try to stress to everybody is I want to view ourselves as the people's protector. That's the kind of mindset we have, and that could be for major crime, that could be corporate misconduct, and it's been a great joy. And what I'd probably like to do is give you a couple quick observations, and then I'd like to hear from you, candidly, because when I talk to folks, you make me do my job better. My staff has heard me say this a million times. I never feel like I'm the smartest person in any room I ever walk into, but I'm smart because I want to hear good ideas. About half the legislative proposals that we push are folks that just bring issues to my attention that I'm not aware of. And I can't be everywhere, right? So our main office is in Richmond, which is where I spend the vast bulk of our time. We have regional offices in Roanoke, Abingdon, Fairfax, and Hampton Roads. But the vast majority of my time is always in Richmond, which is very, very interesting. Somebody asked me today, what was it like taking over for somebody who made a very different philosophy than I did. The story I like to illustrate is I remember meeting with my child support enforcement section. That's one of those 20 plus sections I have in my office. And I'd ask, this is the first 2 weeks in office, I would meet with our section leaders and senior attorneys, and I always ask them, hey, what do you need to do your job with excellence? Because if the people paying your salary, or the watermen here on the shore, or working Newport News shipbuilding, or walking the beat as a cop in Richmond at 2 a.m. in the morning, they're paying our salary. So the least we could do is do the job with excellence. What do you need from me? And I remember meeting with the child support enforcement section, and they said, listen, we would like to go back enforcing and prosecuting child support cases. Which I remember sitting back thinking, wait, do you realize that you're the child support enforcement section? Why aren't you prosecuting child support cases? And they said it's because the previous administration decided, in the name of, quote, equity, for that term, equity, name of equity, it wasn't fair to enforce child support cases during COVID. Now, if you flashback, courts were closed. These are cases these are indigent. Overwhelmingly, over 95% of these cases are indigent women, right? That the state takes over their case because they're desperate. And our office is supposed to be the one to protect them. And they were showing up in court and being told, sorry, I know court's been delayed, but the Office of the Attorney General has dismissed your case, even though they're supposed to be your lawyer, right? 1,108 cases that we found. And so they're like, we want to get back to it. They had this big memo and they wanted me to review it. And I said, I don't need to view the memo. Do what you're supposed to do. Actually be a voice for these women, and if you could prosecute one of these cases before, file something even before close of business today, do so. But that's a kind of a different mindset. But what I've realized is, there's stuff that just a couple years ago that wasn't considered controversial is now considered controversial, right? If I was to say to you just 5 years ago, parents have a fundamental right to the education upbringing of their children, 5 years ago, that would not be considered a controversial statement, would it? Mm-mm. Now it is, right? We saw that, and people ask me, when do you guys think you're going to win? Rob brought me back to memory lane, right? 2021. I remember it was the Saturday before the election. We were in Deep Blue, Alexandria, your home area. We were at the farmers market, and it was a rally. And there was a sea of red there, and I remember I'm standing there, and I look over to my left, and there's Dana Bash from CNN, right? And she says, I think you're going to win. But that wasn't with any joy, right? She did not look very happy about the statement, right? And I said, I think so too. And I remember a mom coming up to me at the event, and she said, I just want you to know that I've never voted Republican my whole life, but I'm voting Republican now. And I said, do you mind me asking you why? I'm really flattered, but I'm just curious, why would you do that? And she said, because you had a lot of politicians who forgot a really important truth. Never, ever, ever get between a mother and her child. And I just said, yes, ma'am. I won't forget it. And that has really animated a lot of what the governor's done and what I've done. We got sworn in, and then within an hour, the governor signed a series of executive orders and handed them to me and said, congratulations, now you get to go defend or enforce these. And that goes back from, when we won our court case with defending, saying parents get to decide whether their kids wear masks in school. It's about empowering the parent. And that's been a huge, huge part of what we've done at Fairfax. And in Loudoun, I can't talk too much about Loudoun, but one thing I was talking earlier is when you look at some of the things happening in our schools, we're investigating Loudoun, and if there's anything that came out of our grand jury report that I thought was just stunning to me, and this is a public document, so I'm not speaking out of turn, but wow, that is an impressive. Intimidating. Wow. It's little Hell's Angels over there. That's really bad. Please do not let me walk It's a lot different than the motorbikes I see coming off the Navy base. Right, that I see. Wow. Just to move on, and please eat. I see some of this amazing food coming out. Please eat. I would say as well, if I was to say to you just a couple years ago, America is an exceptional country. Given more second chances and more people from more backgrounds than any country that has ever existed, I want to be considered controversial. The New York Times called me a couple weeks ago, and they wanted to get my perspective of why they're seeing in polling so many both Latino and Asian American voters shifting to the GOP. And normally when I say the New York Times calls me, you're supposed to say I'm sorry, right? but I was happy to answer that as a child of somebody. My mother fled Cuba, communist dictatorship, with nothing. Right? So I was raised to have such an appreciation for what this country is. And I told them, I said, it used to be both countries talked about the American dream. But now one party walked away from it. My party still talks about it, but it seems like so many members on the other side of the aisle, they talk about the American nightmare. And that creates such a broken, irredeemable picture of America. When only 23% of young Americans, 29 or younger, say love of country is a value they even somewhat care about, that is beyond disturbing. That's what keeps me up at night. The crisis at the border, the fentanyl, the addiction crisis, that's serious. Some of the intel that comes across my desk, there's a lot of really, really bad people that want to do a lot of harm to a lot of innocent Americans. But what keeps me up, what worries me greatly, is an entire generation of young people having no concept of what makes this country unique. That worries me more than anything. And that's what I tell Governor Youngkin. That ultimately is going to be your most important legacy. Because if you paint a picture of America as irredeemably broken and racist, then what you're really painting a picture is America that will always be at war with itself. They cannot heal. It doesn't mean we don't look at dark chapters in our past. Of course we do. It's the way you learn from it. But we have done so much more good than bad. And I'm a living testimony of it. My mother fled Cuba as a scared, penniless, homeless 19-year-old teenager in the fall of 1965 with nothing, literally with nothing. The last thing the communists do to you before you leave your country, they take everything away from you. They post a notice on your door that says property of the revolution, And everything in your home, every picture, every piece of jewelry, every piece of everything you've ever owned in your life, any money you have in your bank account is now a property of the government. Quote, in the name of fairness, right? And she left in the fall of 65, and almost 50 years to the day that she left, in the fall of 2015, after leaving a country with no consent of the governed, she's able to walk into a voting booth, ask for a ballot, and she's able to vote for me to represent her in the oldest continuous democracy in the Western Hemisphere, the House of Delegates, where I got to serve, as Rob noted, for 6 years in Mississippi. And so those are the type of stories we should be teaching our kids as well. Those are the type of stories that I think are missing. And I'm desperate to see that kind of shift in what we're teaching our kids, because not only is it just a lack of discipline, but it's the lack of educational awareness of who we are as people. So it's an amazing being an Attorney General. I'm happy to take some question if that's okay. And again, please eat. I'm much more eloquent if you have some food in your stomach. So please eat, but I'd love to take some questions. Yes, sir.
This is a strategic question, I guess. The Democrats over the last decade have had a systematic effort from doing prosecutor elections to paying the staff, if you will, of election commissions and counters and that sort. And the Republican Party has always seemed to be one election behind. The question is, can we anticipate what they're going to be doing for the 24 elections? Something that we can head off before?
Well, I mean, I will tell you one thing I think we can do that there needs to be a shift in our thinking is in 2021, every day, Glenn, Winston, and I, we got reports on who voted early. And we could track it. And when you know that somebody, we call them high propensity Republican voters, right? That's classified as somebody that's voted 3 out of the last 4 elections, that we know if they get to the voting booth, much more likely than not, because of their past, they voted in multiple previous Republican primaries, that they're going to vote Republican. And once we were able to do that, vote early, lock your vote in, that frees up resources. First of all, if you vote early, your vote's locked in, right? The second is I can free up the resources that go after what we call low propensity Republican voters. This may shock you, but there are hundreds of thousands of folks that do not vote except on presidential years. So part of our job this year is getting out the low propensity voters that come out. The Democrats have been brilliant at getting low propensity Dem voters that normally don't vote in off-year elections to get them trained to vote in off-year elections. And I'm like, if you get tired of all the text messages, you get tired of all the mail, direct mail that goes in your inbox, you get tired of the robocalls.
Vote the first day.
Once your vote gets locked in, we don't have to spend money on you. We do not have to spend money getting you to go vote on election day. And I'm not a fan of the 45-day period, but my attitude though is, in 2021, our attitude was, all right, what are the rules of the game, and let's go win with those rules.
Right.
And so it frees us money. That then I'm like, I don't have to bother. Oh, I got one of the folks that are 3 or 4 out of 4 of the last elections, high propensity. They voted, great. I'm going to take that money. I'm going to go after the folks that maybe they only vote every 4 years, and that's part of our goal. And I think that's a huge. If you look at all the numbers, that is where we are falling. And we used to win the what they call the military absentee ballots. Remember that? Boy, those Republican, those military absentee, and all the business travelers. Boy, when they come in, now the Dems got wise and they said, no, we're gonna try to take advantage of it. So that's what I would say. Now, I've always believed it should be easy to vote, hard to cheat. Long term, we have to have absolute photo ID in our elections, because I think it gives confidence to every Virginian. It makes the most sense. If I have to give you a photo ID to go check out a book from, get a library card to check out a book, I should have photo ID. And I've never seen, there's a couple issues, but there's such a difference between how the media portrays an issue and how the general public portrays the issue. The last poll I showed, I think it was like 55% of Democrats thought
higher than that.
In name ID, photo ID.
That's a good thing.
I think it's even higher. And the general public with independents and Republicans is off the charts. But the media makes it sound like to require an ID to vote is like the most draconian horrific thing, I'm thinking, what are you communicating? You're basically trying to say that getting, and you can get an ID. You don't have to have a driver's license. You can get an ID from DMV essentially almost for free. It makes no sense. So that is the quickest way, I think, to have make sure that we have proper elections. It looks like the food, and everybody's required to eat. Please eat. Ian and little Nick, you guys got to eat to set the example for everyone else. Please.
Don't ask me twice.
All right. Especially not when you're here. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing it to the shore. There's so many things that are coming down from the federal government that I think state AGs are so important. How is the suit on the ESG going?
We have a couple suits on ESGs. They're going well. I would tell you one of it is, it is amazing how blatant they were violating, I think, certain federal laws. So ERISA, which is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, is basically a federal law that says something simple. If I trust you with my life savings as a retiree to invest it, then your number one obligation is to maximize the return of my retirement. And what has happened, when you hear ESG, what has happened is the Biden administration, through an unelected regulatory body, decided to change the number one obligation. Instead of maximizing the return on the investment for the investors, which is our retirees, they said, well, we're going to set our number one priority is now going to be social governance, which is a really fancy word for social justice and left-wing policies. And so it is actually in direct violation of federal law. And that is actually a larger issue. If you want to know one of the reasons why Washington is completely broken, is that Washington no longer legislates through bills. You have all of these unelected federal agencies, executive orders, and administrative regulations that, and the dirty little secret is members of Congress love it, because they never have to have a tough vote. And most of what you think the Biden administration does that we dislike is being done through executive orders and unlegislated administrative actions. So I'll give you an example. You have OSHA, which is supposed to regulate where you put your ladder in your body shop, right? It was an OSHA regulation that said you either get your employees vaccinated or you have to fire them. That wasn't a bill debated through Congress. That was an unelected federal body. Or another example of one that we found, and we took the OSHA to the Supreme Court, we won. Me and some of the other state AGs. But give an example of stuff that you never hear about that's happening. I remember my staff saying, you need to be aware of something USDA is trying to do. So what is that? So the USDA administers a school lunch program for poor, needy kids in America. And they proposed a regulation that if you accept $1 of funding for poor and needy school lunch programs in your child's district, you have to then adopt the Biden administration's transgender policies, which means biological boys and women's sports team and in locker rooms. Now, that would affect over 90% of the school districts in the country accept federal money for poor and reduced lunches. And it's not a bill debated in Congress. It's not something testified in committee, debated on the House floor, then it goes to the Senate. It was something done by an unelected government body in Washington, D.C. that would affect over 90% of the school districts in America. So we got on the phone, banded with some of the other AGs. We put a letter to the Biden administration. If you do this, we will see you in court. And it's amazing once you put them on notice, they then withdrew the regulation, right? But those are the type of things that maybe you weren't aware of, but that's the type of federal overreach we deal with in my office all the time, try to push back. And I think it's a huge, huge problem. ESG is one of many battles that we're fighting with I think, federal overreach.
And you think you're making progress?
Yeah, I think so, because candidly, they, in my opinion, the law is so clear, particularly say on ERISA, it is a real problem. I do not know who was their corporate counsel that looked at ERISA and some of these other federal regs and said they just ignore federal law. It's a serious problem, and I think you're going to see a lot of reforms and announcements coming. Yes, ma'am.
Can anything be done at the state level about central bank digital currency?
Sorry, what?
Can anything be done at the state level about central bank digital currency?
The digital currency. You were talking about crypto? Just to be clear.
No.
No, not crypto.
Talking about the central bank.
Oh, the central bank.
Digital
Oh,
currency.
the digital
so we
currency.
don't have any access to our money if they don't want
Oh,
us
like
to.
what they did in Canada. Yeah, so what they did in Canada was when they did not like the trucker
it's
protests, they
broken.
completely shut down their ability to even withdraw from the banks. That is very different than what we have here, but it also shows that there's an effort by Kristen Sinema to push a digital, national federal digital ID. And that will be, I think, the first step. There's enough right now that recognize it. That's actually something I'm bringing up to the other AGs. What happened in Canada was beyond disturbing. But these are private citizens with private banks, and they suddenly decided we don't like what you're saying, and they basically froze their ability just to withdraw their own money. So yeah, I mean, and I think if they did try, we would file a lawsuit challenge it. I don't think there's this right now. I don't think there's stomach in the United States for any of that. And I think the Kristen Sinema's bill on a federal digital ID. Right now, most people are starting to recognize. I don't think it will pass right now by any stretch. But it is a disturbing trend what you're saying. Yes, sir.
This is a local question, and this is what could we do to get your office to look into a property owners association here on the Eastern Shore? We're 50 years old. We've had 3 declarants. The current one took over from bankruptcy 12 years ago, and they're running us into the ground and using our money for everything. They just recently borrowed another $500,000 on top of our $3 million we owe because they can't manage the money right, and we think they're actually using us as money laundering or whatever. We do have a suit against them. So I was just wondering, what could we do to get your
Well,
office to
the
look
best
at
way
it?
is to do what I did in my neighborhood, my homeowners association. They were too nitpicky, so we voted them all out.
We
Put it
can't
on
vote
board.
them out because they have controlled our board for 12 years. They have a 3-1 vote as soon as they run us into the ground.
Wait, but when is the next time they're up? Is it every year, every 2 years? How
No,
long?
it's staggered.
It's
so.
also slanted.
There's no way
It's
to
slanted
get-
in the owner's favor. I'll explain it to you.
Oh, yeah, that's
Slanted,
what it is.
yes.
Okay.
It's all the cards.
I mean,
are against
I
that
am not
one.
aware of our office getting involved with property owners.
We've been through the ombudsman and they have no real teeth in it.
Well, I mean, listen, if you feel like there's some type of money laundering, have you filed any type of complaints with the state police? I would.
We've tried through local, but there is, it's just gonna, I guess it's just gonna have to go through our lawsuit.
Well, the state equivalent of the FBI is the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the state police, BCI. I would actually contact them, financial crimes. We do have a financial crimes kind of section, and maybe I can get your information from Rob and have one of my attorneys in that section take a look at it. This is the first time, just off the top of my head, I don't know of another active investigation with property owners association. But listen, there's a first time for everything, right?
I mean, everybody that looks at it says it's definitely fraud here.
Okay, well,
As soon as they took over the community, they took over the board of directors. They told them, oh, by the way, all your documents are going to Baltimore. You won't see them again.
let me get your information after this. That work?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My concern is climate
Oh, well,
change.
ladies first, ladies first.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize
There's somebody there, but we go ahead.
there's climate change. I believe climate change is now, I've worked as an aerospace system engineer for a long, long time. And none of my colleagues and I agree with climate change. Carbon dioxide does not change the temperature. It's a plant food. And if you reduce the plant food to half of what it is now, the plants won't survive. So fossil fuel is good, the other stuff, I mean, I don't mind different aspects of energy, the solar, all's good. But to put their thumb on fossil fuel to try to restrict it to that, is wrong, and it's somehow conflated with pollution. Pollution is different. It's plastic in the ocean. It's chemicals leaching into the streams. That's a different thing. Carbon dioxide is essential to our life, to our plant life. And you've got these people like Curry and Gore running around, trying to
On their private jets.
yeah, and is there anything you as part of the state can?
Well, we've been involved in, like, when you say ESG, some of ESG is basically trying to punish any investments into any company that does any business with the fossil fuel industry. When you think about the revolution in the shale industry, we were net importers of oil up into the early 2000s, and the shale revolution completely changed. Now we're a net energy exporter, and I've always been an all the above approach as far as how do we meet our energy needs. But I tell people I live in reality, right? I don't live in a world in which I think we have a problem with government where it's what we wish life was like, not the reality of life.
Very noble.
It's very, it's a little bit of a Peter Pan existence in the sense that right now there's simply, you can't meet our energy needs without an all of the above. In other words, solar is not going to do it. Wind is not going to do it. And the long-term trends, and this is what I tell people, I have much greater faith in technology than the heavy hand of government. A brand new Ford F-150 pickup truck today that comes off the assembly line today is as fuel efficient as a 2001 Honda Accord. Do you know that? Most people don't even know that, right? I told this to some college kids, they didn't believe me. They also didn't believe when I pointed out that our carbon footprint today is about what it was 10 plus 15 years ago when our population was 100 million less people. So I'm like, I have much greater faith in technology than the heavy hand of government. And the analogy I use, where's my phone? Here it is. The analogy I use when I talk to people why I have much more faith in free markets is this right here, this device has as much computing power as the Apollo astronaut program. The equivalent of computing power used to take up 4 square city blocks. And now it's in this little device you put in your pocket. You don't even think about it. And the point I always make is, this is brought to you by what? Free market. They have all these free apps. I can download any book from any author, any song from any artist. I can put in a map right now if I wanted to drive to Washington, D.C. for some reason. Tell me exactly how to get there and what's the best route. I have an app on my phone that could scan a product on a shelf at the pharmacy and it'll tell me if I could buy the same product in a 10-mile radius cheaper. Right? I mean, it's amazing, this device. Now compare this device that used to be 4 square city blocks now in your pocket to the last time you went into your DMV or your post office. How do you even compare the two? When you go in there, do you feel like you're having your needs met? So I think the great reality is you do not want to be in a position where you are what I call energy poverty, right? In which you are forcing working class Virginians or working class Americans to subsidize the green revolution for wealthier Americans. And the great example of that is when they pass, and Rob voted against it, and I voted against it when they tied our emission standards in California to an unelected air quality board in California, right? And so what it means is it requires by the year 2035 that no longer will there be any non-electric vehicles sold in Virginia. Now, what people don't realize is it's a graduated scale. So it's starting in 2 years, it's going to be up to 25% of all vehicles, and then 30% and 35%.
Can they change that?
We can't if we get control of the state Senate. But the average price of an electric vehicle in America today is $66,000. And our sales of total new vehicle sales in America last year jumped from 1% of all new vehicle sales to about 2%, right? So as one car dealer told me, for us to get to even 25% of sales, it's going to require us to artificially inflate the price of every non-electric vehicle on my lot. So it means, as one dealer told me, it's working class Virginians subsidizing EVs, which are overwhelmingly, for EVs, are oftentimes second and third cars for folks, it's luxury items. But not for somebody that's their primary mode of transportation. And I find that important. So I know that that's one thing we'll immediately vote to repeal if we get control in this governor's pledge to overturn. You had a question back there, Steve?
Yeah, you said at one point that you were concerned about the generation coming up not being real patriotic. We have a group of immigrants, whether they be illegal and illegal aliens coming across the border, that are getting free food, free benefits. We give them a Virginia driver's license. But yet, we can't give them a document where they can get a job. We're taking that group of people and teach them to not work. Whereas, I have them come into my place of business all the time, but I can't hire them because they are not documented. But yet, they have a Virginia driver's license.
Our immigration policy is the exact opposite way of how you should do everything, right? So it should be that if an employer can't find an employee, right, you should be able to match it up. That's the general rule of economics, right? I would say this, is that we allow 1 million legal immigrants a year in this country. We've always been incredibly generous. I'm a beneficiary of it. But what's happening in our southern border is chaos. It's absolute chaos. It's a level of fentanyl and human trafficking, and there's now words that previously were not entered into law enforcement lexicon. I mean, I never thought I would have to determine what the word rape tree meant, and now I have to figure that out because the cartels, which are their foreign terrorist organizations, what they're doing, the misery they're exploiting, is horrific. Now, yes, we should make it easier for workers and employers to be able to meet, and I don't disagree with you at all. But it is a huge, huge problem what we have, where the Biden administration says, hey, we're going to hire 87,000 new IRS agents to audit small businesses. We're not going to hire 87,000 new border agents to get control over it. And it's simply not, it's absolute chaos what is happening right now. It's human misery. The drug cartels are exploiting people right now. Now, I will say this. People ask me, what are some things that surprise you? I'll tell you, if you ever want to feel patriotic, go to a naturalization ceremony. I did one last week at Patrick Henry's home, Red Hill. It's amazing. Got to meet some of the most great, when I'd say gratitude is such an underrated trait in our society, these folks have such gratitude to be here, right? Now, what's so jarring for me is, I'll speak at a naturalization ceremony. It's one of my earliest memories of seeing my mom become a citizen. And at the end of the ceremony, you hand them a $1 American flag, and it's like handing them a diamond. And they fled oppression. They know what oppression looks like. They know this is not it. And you go from that ceremony to, in the span of the same week, I will speak at a college campus or high school seniors, and the level of disdain they have. Just disdain for our country. It is that disturbs me more than anything else. Is they create such a distorted view of who we are. And so at the end of the day, you absolutely have to have a way, you have to have some level, you will never get to a point, unless you show you control our border, where I think Americans feel comfortable determining the scenario you just described. You have to give Americans confidence there's some level of control of the border. We're not there yet. That's our problem. What they're seeing right now, the images we're seeing, it's just not manageable. It's not manageable. You had a question, sir.
Yes, it did. What's the policy with Maryland? Who's holding that up?
We're talking about on concealed weapons permit?
Concealed carry.
It usually has to be a two-way street. We won't recognize, since they won't recognize us, we won't recognize them. That's generally how it works.
You would recognize.
Yeah, if Maryland came in now and said we'd recognize Virginia concealed weapons holders, yeah. Yeah. But if they're not going to recognize us, why would I, why would Virginia, and it's not necessarily my call per se, I can interpret the law.
Recognize their own.
But they don't want to recognize, they don't want to recognize their own. But that's our problem. I mean, we straightened that out with North Carolina really quick, but Maryland's a different animal. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I think I heard you touch on it earlier about Loudoun County, but just in general, have you seen any other thing in Virginia or even across the country, lists like this from the Democrat progressive parents calling out the Republicans and keeping lists, trying to get people fired, trying to stop on their heads? Have you seen that anywhere else? Because I've not heard of it. It's totally like unbelievable.
So what has happened is apparently I showed up on a list, a hit list, or a target list, or a we don't like this person list. I still don't know what the heck it is. I think I was number 5 on the list. I was actually surprised I wasn't higher. By the Loudoun Love Warriors. I hate to see if they what list they'd be on if it was a Loudoun Hate Warriors, right? And they were very upset at anybody that was challenging some of their kind of far left orthodoxy. And they had a Facebook group that had a chat, and they wanted the mission on this list was to destroy everybody on the list. And it got to the point where people were on the list advocating actual violence towards people on the list, where they were posting addresses of where they lived, and the anti-gun liberals were actually posting photos of them brandishing weapons, and yeah, it was disturbing. My daughter saw the list. That's not an easy conversation a parent has with their child. There's a limit what I can and cannot say, but I'm monitoring very closely and stay tuned. That's all I'll say. I'm not happy about it at all. Okay, I think I have one more question. Ian is my time man. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? No? Listen, it is a great honor to be here and to work with you all. It's an honor to be in the trenches with you. Ultimately, you're here because you know this is indeed that last best hope on earth, and you know it's worth preserving, and it's worth fighting for, and I'm honored to fight with you for it. So thank you all. God bless. I might take that to go.